What is happening, mediocre people of YouTube? Look at the mess on the floor here. We got that Hot Rod Deluxe out, and sounds good, and it could be better, but people don't want to put $300 worth of work into their $900 amp, and I don't know. So be it, but hopefully by the time it comes back, hopefully it can be worked on. But that's not what I'm here to talk about anyway. I wanted to talk about. First off, I wanted to talk about, and I've talked about this in videos before. I'm going to clean this camera a little because I know it's kind of cruddy. Maybe that's better. I've talked about this in videos before about how, you really don't know what someone recorded with. You don't know. You don't know what guitar they recorded with. You don't know what amp they recorded with. You really just don't know unless you were there or you actually talked to the person and they were honest with you, and they could be honest with you. That's the other thing is, there's, if you ask whoever, Eddie Van Halen or whoever, what amps they recorded with, or Randy Rhoads back then, or whoever your favorite guitarist is, if you don't know the guy and you ask him what amplifiers he recorded with, he's probably not going to give you a truthful answer, and there's a reason for that. And it goes back to this, and especially here in the United States, everything, like you say, family's first, your job comes second, right? Well, at least as it stands here in the United States, your job comes second, but it's a really close second, right? Because here in the U.S., we put our health second. We put our job before we put our health, which is not the way it's supposed to be. It's not right. That being said, everything is being monetized. Everything is being monetized. And the music business is certainly no exception from everything being monetized, right? And what I mean by that is, let's say you get hired into Ozzy's band as a guitar player, or whoever's band, I don't really know bands anymore, but you get hired into this band, and then they're a good band and everything. You're going to record with them, right? And Marshall approaches you and they say, "Hey, we'd like to sign you to a contract, and we're going to give you $500,000, and we're going to outfit you with the whatever Marshall amps you want, and you can keep them, and all you need to do is make the appearance that you're using our stuff. And if anybody asks you what you're using, always the appearance that you're using our stuff." Now, that doesn't mean you're actually using it. But if somebody asks you, "Hey, what'd you record with?" do you think that guy, or you think you're going to blow your deal with Marshall and say, "Oh, I recorded with all PV stuff"? No. You're not going to pass up $500,000 on a bunch of amplifiers for free. You're going to say, "No, I recorded with straight up Marshalls." You might have recorded with straight up Fenders. You might have recorded with straight up Gorilla amplifiers, And the same thing goes for the people in the studio. The very famous and very popular studios. What will happen is PV or Fender or whoever will approach the owner of the studio and say, "Hey, we'd like to sign you to a contract. We're going to give you $250,000. We're going to outfit your studio with PV amplifiers, and all you got to do is when people come in to record, if they're not using PV, if they're using Marshall or whatever, is direct them to a PV amplifier. I mean, you can't force them to play it, but there's a good chance, yeah, that sounds good, you're through your Marshalls, but hey, you know what, it's missing something. Check out this PV amplifier." And then you plug into it and you go, "Oh man, that sounds really good." Well, guess what? Now that guy's going to go out and buy $1 million worth of PV stuff, So don't think, everything's not being monetized all the time. And don't think for a second that, anyone's telling you the truth, especially in the music business, when you ask them what they recorded with. Um, and then it goes into other things like, there's a good chance, a good producer, there's a pretty good chance he is, you're a guitar player. There's a very good chance he has a dry signal coming in and being recorded of your guitar, meaning it's just a dry signal. There's nothing on it. It's just dry signal being recorded. And then what he'll do, a good mastering guy or whatever, maybe he doesn't like your sound. Maybe he loves your sound and he just doesn't even use that. But he has it anyway, right? But if he doesn't really like your sound, he may take that dry track and reamp it, and then mix it with that. And then you come into the studio and you're like, damn, man, I sound good, and you don't even know about it. So, that happens all the time. There's just so much that when you start asking about what a person recorded with in a studio, all you can go by is, especially if that person's dead, all you can go by is, what the people who were there say, and who have no reason to lie about it, Mrs. Rhodes, what reason does she have to lie about the little amplifier she got Randy? And he played through it all the time. He recorded through it all the time, what reason did Bob Daisley have to lie about it, Especially when you go out, and yeah, I looked up Bob Daisley's book online. I saw it. I didn't buy it, didn't read it, but it didn't say anything about what amplifiers Randy used. I mean, dude, it just becomes, So, Rudy Sarzo talked about Randy, and what he used and what he didn't use, and Ozzy talked about, the frying pan or whatever he called it, the chip pan. That was Randy's pedal board that he had made, which was, at the time, he had it made to his specs, and it was like $1,100, which is a lot of money for a pedal board back then, especially. And, as soon as he turned it on, Ozzy said it sounded like a frying pan, And then Randy said, too, he said that, and he wasn't even really using that anymore because of what they were doing at the front of house, through the PA. They were doing so much through there that there was really no reason to use his effects, other than like a boost and a solo and stuff like that. So yeah, I've talked about this before about what did this person record with? Well, what they told you they recorded with and what they actually recorded with could be 2 or 3 different things, if they were under an endorsement deal with a particular brand of amplifier, or maybe they were under an endorsement deal with a particular guitar manufacturer, they may have recorded the entire album playing a Fender Strat, but they were endorsed by Gibson. They had a deal with Gibson. Gibson came along and said, hey, we're going to give you a $500,000 contract and the Gibson guitars you want, and all you got to do is make the appearance that you're using Gibson guitars. Like I said, they played the whole album. They recorded with Fenders and Dan Electros and everything else, everything but a Gibson. You ask them what they recorded with, what do you think they're going to say? Well, all Gibsons. They're not going to blow their deal. And when you go into a recording studio, especially a good recording studio, Pearl Sounds here, where I'm at, is been around forever, and they've got all kinds of stuff to play with, including, not just amplifiers, but guitars and just all kinds of different instruments to play with. And when you go into a recording studio, record an album, and you actually have a budget, which, I've never really had a big unlimited budget. I mean, people used to easily spend $500,000 on recording a record. You would literally move into the studio and record your record. Those big bands did that. We may have scraped together like $3,000 or something back then. I think the one we scraped together like $5,500 one time for some recording time. And you know, you only have so many hours, you know, to do what you're going to do. So guys like us need to get in and out of there. You know, we need to get in there and get done what we want to, and then if we can finish that up, then we can play with all the different stuff and maybe change something if there's enough time or whatever. You know, and that doesn't include mastering either. So, you know, these big bands, they, you know, like, you know, back in the day, Metallica did that video. There was a double video. It was a really cool video movie. It was called A Year and a Half in the Life of Metallica. It was a really cool documentary, and they documented how they wrote the Black Album. And yeah, man, they moved into that studio, and you know, they were there for a year and a half, man. I can't imagine being able to move into a studio and just stay there for a year and a half, you know, playing around. I mean, I would hope you'd be able to come up with something pretty cool in a year and a half's time, and all that kind of equipment and that kind of a budget, you know. But you know, not a lot of recording studios left. You know, not a lot of real studios left. You know, everything went digital, you know, so long ago now that you know, there's not a lot of studios that have that old school style of recording. You know, we recorded on tape. I still have the masters, and that's just, I mean, I know it made a comeback after whatever the Foo Fighters did, when Dave Grohl bought that Neve console from Sound City and all that. I guess it was called Sound City, the movie. A pretty cool movie. And tape did make a comeback there, and I don't know if it still is making a comeback, but you know, those old school boards and actually playing through actual amplifiers, and you know, not just listening through in-ear monitors, you know. And you know, the way things go today, where you know, a buddy of mine's like, hey man, you want to cover a few tracks? And I'm like, yeah, let's do it, you know. And I'm thinking we're getting together, and he's like, okay, cool, I'll send you the track, and then you know, throw your guitar on it and send it back. And I've done that, you know, just because, you know, I'd rather do that than nothing. So, but I would much rather just get 5 guys or 5 people into a room with live instruments, with real rigs, 4x12 cabs, and just jam out, you know. I mean, there's a whole lot of musicians today who are missing out and who have missed the bus on that one, and probably will never get on the bus, you know, which is a shame. Yeah, that's a shame. So, you know, if any younger guys are watching this and you want some advice, my advice is to drop all the dumb shit you're doing now, and you know, whether it doesn't need to mean that you need to have tube stuff or anything, but just get yourself a loud amplifier, you know, and get together in a room, and get together in a garage, get together in a friggin' storage unit. That's where we used to rehearse. You know, you can get a storage unit 10x20 for $100 or something, probably, you know. We used to have a 20x20, and I don't know, back then it was, I think that was like $100 back then, which was a lot of money. But we had that whole thing rigged out. There was a storage, it's still there, you know, storage unit place, and they had power, and they actually encouraged people, yeah, if you want to, you know, rehearse here, go ahead. So there was like 20 bands in there at one time, and you know, it was like, you know, it was cool because you could just walk up and down the aisles and meet different people, and you know, everybody was hashing out. There was so many bands, man, when I was coming up as a young buck, man. It seemed like everybody was in a band, and I don't know if it's that way or not. I don't believe it's that way now, and that's a shame. But you know, music, from what I hear of the new stuff, is really garbage. And I know, you know, every generation has gone through that. Oh yeah, man, after the Beatles, there was just garbage, you know. And but pretty much since about 2002, it's been garbage, you know. 2005, let's say, just give it the benefit of the doubt, right? It's just been nothing but garbage being produced. But anyway, if you think you know what somebody recorded with, think again and think about it a little deeper, because it goes deeper than your little pea brain can handle. So, you know, again, like I say, when I tell you guys this information, it's not because I think I'm great. It's because I like other people to understand, to know this information, because it's cool. It's cool to know that, you know, what Randy actually recorded with, you know. Max Norman, and I'll never forget this, Max Norman always said, you know, Randy recorded left, right, and center, and he didn't record one track and then they layered it like that. He recorded 3 tracks. And Max Norman said he'd never seen anyone play something 3 times, especially a solo, 3 times in a row exactly the same. And Randy could do it all the time, all day long. I wish I could do that, you know. Anyway, it's springtime. Peace out.